It's the Fitness Lab Pittsburgh podcast, a new episode every week. A podcast about movement, part of making your life complete. Fitness Lab Pittsburgh, aka FitLab PGH, brings you interviews with people in the Pittsburgh area who understand movement is part of what makes life complete. Looking for a new movement idea or just want to hear interesting stories about people who make movement a priority? This is the podcast for you. Whether you consider the gym, dojo, or fitness studio your third place, or just want to learn more about movement, activity, and fitness to enhance your life, give FitLab PGH a listen. We interview locals in the Pittsburgh area who make Pittsburgh a great place to move. Subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or Google Play, or check out our website for other subscription options. Subscribing is free and gives you notifications when we release new episodes. Each podcast episode will be long enough to pique your interest and short enough to hold your attention. Have an idea for an episode? Know somebody we should interview? Or just want to connect with us? Drop us an email, fitlabpgh@gmail.com, or follow us on Twitter or Instagram at fitlabpgh. Already a fan of FitLab PGH? Check out our sister podcast, Moving to Live. Moving to Live is a podcast for movement professionals and amateur aficionados. Moving to Live offers weekly interviews with movement professionals featuring topics from career development to coaching tips and education resources to advice for parents of student athletes. We look forward to hearing from you, and we hope you enjoy our next interview, starting now. FitLab PGH and our sister podcast, Moving to Live, firmly believe that movement should be treated as a lifestyle, not just an activity. That's why, in addition to our podcast, FitLab PGH has a FitLab Pittsburgh Features every Thursday. Go to our website, click on FitLab Pittsburgh Features info, fill out a form, and you can be a FitLab Pittsburgh featured person or four-legged animal. In addition, 3 times a week, we release movement tips and lifestyle hacks on YouTube and Instagram. If you like what you hear, leave us some feedback on Apple Podcasts or your podcast listening app. Drop us an email and tell us what you like and give us some suggestions. FitLab PGH back with another podcast interview. This is another interview in a coffee shop. So for those of you who have listened before, you've heard me say that if it's in a coffee shop, it has to be a good interview. This is one of those people that we located by stalking her organization on social media and saying, hey, this would be a really neat interview because they work with children. And it's a really neat interview because they get kids outside and moving. We are with Leslie Turis. She works with Kids of Steel, and she agreed to cross a bridge to come to Southpointe to talk to us. So, Leslie, thanks for taking time to talk to FitLab PGH.
Thanks. I'm so excited.
First question I always ask people that we interview for FitLab Pittsburgh is, are you a Pittsburgh native? If so, why are you still here? Or why did you come back? Or if you're not a Pittsburgh native, how did you end up in Pittsburgh?
Yes, I am a Pittsburgh native, but I did leave for a while. I grew up in Perryopolis, which is a small town off of 51 in Fayette County. And I went to the University of Pittsburgh, and after graduation, I moved to Columbus, Ohio. I spent some time in Kentucky, and I moved back to Pittsburgh about 2 years ago from Queens, New York.
And do you think you're here for the duration, or you think at some point you'll do a little traveling elsewhere too and live elsewhere for a few years?
I hope this is back for good. We were very excited to come back, so I'm committed.
I'm curious, what's the thing that you missed the most when you weren't in Pittsburgh?
The water, the rivers and the bridges, for sure.
So you work for Kids of Steel. We want to find a little bit more about your story. But first of all, for people who are listening and they're kind of figuring, I want to find out what Kids of Steel is. What's your 30-second elevator speech on Kids of Steel? People see you with a T-shirt or a coffee cup that says Kids of Steel, and they say, what the heck is Kids of Steel? Is it a weightlifting club?
No, we are all about getting kids running. So Kids of Steel is the biggest program that I oversee as the youth program manager for P3R. P3R is the organizer of the Dick's Sporting Goods Pittsburgh Marathon, as well as a variety of other races and programs that are designed to get Pittsburgh moving, to keep Pittsburgh running. So through Kids of Steel, it's a free curriculum that gets kids thinking about making healthy choices around exercise and food.
And for you, are you a lifetime mover, or is it something that you explored either in college or after college and adulthood?
Definitely adulthood. I was not a sporty kid by any stretch of the imagination. I was not competitive. I was pretty uncoordinated and clumsy, but I was active. My parents definitely liked my sister and I to be playing outside. So, being in Fayette County, that was, walking the neighborhood or playing out in the woods or in the creek. So definitely always active, but not sporty.
So what made you decide to, and I have the advantage of having your bio in front of me and a little questionnaire, what made you decide to do things like start running?
Work. Yeah, when I moved to Columbus, Ohio, and I was working in an education policy group, so very busy, but very desk-centered. And being in a new city, I really didn't know anybody, and there was a YMCA a couple doors down, so that was a good thing for me to do after work. And I walked in, I had no idea what I was doing, so I jumped on the elliptical because it seemed safe. I had my headphones and a stack of magazines and watching TV, anything I could do to distract me from the fact that I was working out. But I kept going, and it got easier, which is something I tell kids a lot. The more you do it, the easier it gets, or the stronger you get. But while working on at the Y, I started noticing there was a group of people who were training for local 5Ks together. So I got off the treadmill and I got outside because one of those races that they were training for was going to benefit the local animal shelter. So I decided that's what I want to do. That's what I want my first 5K to be about. So I got outside and never looked back.
Favorite thing about running now that you've been doing it a while?
The quiet, that I get to be out by myself, and it's just a great opportunity to think.
And I know you can be very active as a runner and participate in races, even if you're not super, super competitive, because let's face it, we can all use a new t-shirt or a cool design t-shirt, or maybe it's a race where all the finishers get a beer mug or a coffee cup. Any memories of a favorite race or event that you've done in the past? Like, boy, that was really cool.
I would say that running became really important to me when I moved to New York, and that was how I got to learn my way around New York. So I wouldn't have gotten into parts of the Bronx that I did or seen as much of Central Park as I have if it wasn't for running the events in New York. I think the quirkiest one I might have done while I was there was a New Year's Eve run. So we started before midnight, and when it became the new year, we were out on the course. So instead of a water table, there was a sparkling apple cider toast and things like that. So,
and I would imagine some of the runners went to parties before they came to the New Year's run, and that made for some interesting fellow runners.
People were in a good mood, that's for sure.
Any bucket list or any races or events or activities that are on your list in the future, maybe when you get a little more time or travel someplace?
Yeah, traveling would definitely be something I want to do for running. I'm looking at a few things in Scotland. There's a marathon that is in the Scottish countryside, but there's also another race, and this would require me to get much more mileage in than what I'm currently doing, that goes from Glasgow to Edinburgh.
How far is that?
I think 55 miles. Yeah.
That would be a story to tell, and I hear the aid stations are Scotch whiskey. Curious, does your husband also run?
No, not exactly. He's done a marathon, but he has gotten away from it.
Have you done the Pittsburgh Marathon?
I have not. Last year I did, before I worked here, I did the first leg of the relay, and it was definitely a great experience, and the crowd turnout was bigger than any other race I've ever been a part of. So,
and I know one of the things that's hard, even though you're the youth director, you probably get pulled into doing things, organizing the marathon. So actually having the time to train from now until May, it's like, yeah, that's probably not a priority since I have a paying job.
Yeah, and with all of our events, like whether it's the EQT 10 miler or the Gap Trail relay, it's all hands on deck. So even though I'm youth program, with the Gap Trail relay, I'm out there doing operations or registration like anybody else in the organization would be.
And we talked a little bit before recording, like me, you are a dog lover and the owner of a dog, we'll have to get your dog on FitLab Pittsburgh features.
She would love that, yeah.
And I'm curious, do you run with your dog or walk with your dog?
Oh, walking is a significant portion of our day, but I actually chose her thinking she'd be my running buddy. I was living in New York at the time, and I went into the shelter and I got the biggest, craziest dog that was there, thinking I'd be able to harness that energy into running. And we're still working on it. It's been about 2 years, and we're still working on it.
I think my one dog that I've mentioned before has epilepsy and is on drugs, but she is defined by one of the neurologists as, quote, an energetic lab. And every time she does something, my first thought is, oh my God, imagine how active she would be if she wasn't on all these epileptic drugs.
Oh gosh, yeah. And that's how I first got, that's how I first noticed you guys, was through the labs and being out in the woods with them. That's something that Dolly and I could relate to.
One of the things about getting the most energetic dog that's good is you get a dog with personality. There's probably times where you're like, oh my God, I can't believe you did this. But it's so much more enjoyable than a dog that just sits in the corner. And it is, as we've said before, dogs are not accoutrements. They're part of your family and part of your lifestyle.
Yeah, very much so.
So any other events or any other activities that you do to move besides dog walking and some running?
I really enjoy spin. Yeah, either at a bike I have at home or out in a local studio. There's a lot of good spin studios in the area, so I like to get out to a class at least once a week.
Looking at yourself now compared to when you first went to that YMCA in Columbus, are you kind of shocked? I can't believe I do these sorts of things now.
I can't believe I spend the money I spend on these kind of things now. Yeah. I've benefited greatly from working out, just, either through meeting people or just making healthier choices, or physically, like mentally, just.
I know one of the things that you can use for justification for the money you spend when you're at the Pittsburgh Marathon Expo and they have a great deal on shoes is this is an investment in your health for the quality of life. And I sometimes have told the story when I've taught a health class at a previous institution I worked at, told the story about a friend of my parents who was 80-some years old, fell down and broke a hip. And at that time, they didn't set people's hips or fix people's broken hips, so they put her in bed and she lived for another 20 years, which is a horrible way to be.
Wow.
And then I would tell the counter of that is a gentleman who was in his 80s, and this was in Florida, so it was warm year-round, and he got up on a Labor Day and went for a bike ride, and he was actually a long-distance triathlete, but he went for a bike ride, had a massive stroke, and was dead when he hit the ground. And I would say to these 18 and 19-year-old students, isn't that great? Isn't that wonderful? And they look at me like they were horrible. Like I was this terrible person. But if you think about it, the more fit you are, the more you're able to do things, you can enjoy life, and hopefully right up until the last day and you finish, it's like, wow, I had a great run this morning. Oop, I'm gone.
Yeah.
So how did you get hooked up with P3R and specifically Kids of Steel?
So I was a nonprofit fundraiser for a number of years, and I enjoyed the work that I did, but I also really enjoyed running and working out. So that led me to get a personal training certification. I had friends that were always asking me to help them work out, and one thing led to another, and I pursued that as a certification. And I was doing some of that on the side, but when I was living in New York, I came across a position very similar to the one that I have now with youth running.
And was there a specific reason that you gravitated towards youth running, or was it because there was a position involving running and fundraising?
I think the more I talk to parents, they all say the same thing, which is I wish that there was a program like this when I was a kid, and I could say the same thing. The work that we do through Kids of Steel, I wish I had these types of opportunities when I was a young girl.
And I know one of the things that people often say, and you said it yourself, you said, I wasn't competitive growing up. And one of the things that, again, you've alluded to is you don't have to be competitive to be a runner. You can be a runner and you can be competitive and try to place in your age group, or you can be a runner and just say, I want to see how many different T-shirts I can get.
Exactly. And we're all out on the same course. And that's what I love talking to kids about, is that running is for everybody. It could be your hobby. It could be your sport. It could make you better in sports. And in running as an adult, like what other sports puts the amateur on the same course as the elite? Mm-hmm. And that's what happens at every P3R event. So it's open to everybody, and you could find your place.
So you can run the EQT 10 miler or the Pittsburgh Marathon or the Pittsburgh Half Marathon and see, wow, I did really well. But oh my God, the elite people were 35, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 minutes faster than you. And it makes you realize how good the elite people are and how cool it is that you ran the exact same course.
Yeah, we're all working towards a goal. We're all out there seeing what we could get out of ourselves.
I know I'm dating myself now. I had the opportunity when I lived in Auburn. I was able to run the Atlanta Marathon, which was on Thanksgiving Day, the year of the Atlanta Olympics, and they had it on the same course. So there was the blue line.
Oh, wow.
So my time was significantly slower than even the slowest marathoner, but it was still really cool. You'd be running along and you'd look down and you'd see the blue line. I was like, wow, like 3 or 4 months ago, that was the Olympic athletes running on that. Now I'm running in the same spot that probably somebody touched.
That's awesome.
So tell us about Kids of Steel and why kids should consider joining Kids of Steel or tell their parents about it. Why can't you just send your kid to go run around the block or run in the backyard? What can Kids of Steel give them that they can't get on their own?
So Kids of Steel takes all that natural energy that kids have, and we channel it into goal setting. So through our curriculum, not only are you getting some resources to make healthier choices around physical activity and food, but you're getting the opportunity to complete a mileage log. So the way that the program works is you do 25 training miles. You could do that independently. Most of our sites are school-based or in an after-school program. So you talk about goals and you keep track of your mileage. You do those 25 miles and then you do your last mile, the 26th mile, at the Pittsburgh Kids Marathon, which is part of the Pittsburgh Marathon weekend of events. So after your 25 miles, we bring all 6,000 kids together for one of the largest kids races in the country, where we celebrate what you have spent the last few weeks working towards. So the kids get a true race experience. It's a closed course. It's a fun course. There's a medal, there's a shirt, there's the bag with all the runner goodie bag swag, and then there's a post-race party at Point State Park.
And I'm curious, what are the ages that Kids of Steel is for?
So it's a 1 mile course. So we suggest that for whoever would find that distance appropriate. Most of the kids on race day are in elementary school age.
And do you find that some of the kids who do the Kids of Steel, that they get some of their mileage by doing some of your other shorter events, the 5Ks, et cetera?
That's a good question. We're seeing a lot of kids do the 1 mile course 1 year and then take on the 5K the next year.
So with Kids of Steel, you mentioned that they do their final run as the 1 mile run with the Pittsburgh Marathon as part of the Pittsburgh Marathon weekend. How many sites or places is it offered throughout the Pittsburgh area? You said a lot of it was in elementary schools.
Right. Right now we have about 146 schools that are taking part in the Kids of Steel program.
And how do schools, if somebody's listening to this and say, boy, I'd really like to get my school involved, how do they find out about it, or what are the requirements to be a site?
So the program model is very flexible, and we encourage that they just reach out and talk to us about how they see this working best for their community. We have a number of sites that are doing this before the school day starts, as part of a PE period, during recess, or after school, or more like a virtual run club where they check in on the group a couple of times throughout the season, and then the kids go off and complete the mileage log by getting their parents active.
Since you started this and working with kids and introducing them to running, I know you mentioned you came to running later in life. Have you been surprised by anything that you've seen from the kids as far as how they've responded to it, or kids have come up to you and said, I never knew that I would like to run. I hated it, but this is fun?
Yeah, that's the typical experience is you walk in and you talk to the kids about signing up for the program, either like through an assembly or some other type of like kickoff event. We say, you're going to run 26 miles. And they're like, no, I'm not. That's crazy. But they realize that if they put in the time and break it down bit by bit, like they could reach their goal. And that's a huge life lesson for them as well.
Have you had students or kids who've done multiple years of participation in this?
Yes. Yeah. It definitely becomes a bit of a family tradition. That's part of the Kids Marathon, is that the registration entry includes an adult. So they could invite a grown-up to run the course and celebrate their accomplishments with them.
And I think what's interesting, as you said a few minutes ago, that as part of the Kids of Steel program, they do something related to goal setting. How does the goal setting work? You go to assembly, you talk to the kids about it, you've got, let's be really generous, in one place you get 500 kids who sign up.
Okay.
And then you have to talk to them about setting goals. How does that work?
The mileage log is really important, and I think especially as like a young student, you realize you can't do it all at the last minute. So coming up with a schedule about how you're gonna take on the next 25 miles.
So you're in 146 schools, over 6,000 kids, or somewhere around 6,000 kids, and with that, do you find, or how do you get coaches for this? Are these the coaches who work in the different schools? Are they volunteers?
Our coaches are amazing. Usually it's a teacher or a parent affiliated with the school who really wants to see a healthier community, and this is an option for them to do that. So the program delivery model, it's really flexible, and we know that if they're committed to getting kids moving, they also know what's best for their community. So we work with them to figure out what's best.
I'm kind of curious with the fact that they run 26 miles. This is just me being a data geek. Do you have that extra 0.2 miles so they're running a full marathon, or do we just say 26 miles is we're rounding it off?
I'll check the course for this year.
Maybe there'll be a 26-mile point, and then if you walk back a little bit and turn around and come back, you can get the 26.2. Because you know as a runner that there are always some runners, especially with GPS watches, they'll go, wait a second, that was supposed to be a 5K, and that was 3.15 miles, not 3.1 miles. Now now it's going to screw up my log.
That's true. Runners do like data, so.
26 miles, they finish with the Pittsburgh Marathon weekend. How long a period of time from when they start with the Kids of Steel program until the marathon weekend? Do they start at the beginning of the school year, the beginning of the new year? We're doing this second to last day of January.
Yeah, right now it's go time. So most of our sites are getting started in February. The program could start as late as March, though, as well.
And then they finish with the Pittsburgh Marathon. Do you find that some of the programs come to you and say, hey, what can we do from now until next year? Or do some of the people come to you when they're doing it in subsequent years and say, hey, we still kept some sort of a running club going over the summer and in the fall semester also?
Yeah, so we have programming for different ages and for year-round opportunities. So in the summer, we have a running camp for youth, and we have other family-friendly events throughout the year, the Dollar Bank Junior Great Race, for example, the Flyby 5K. Both of those are in September. So we do have kids that finish the course in May and they want to know what's next. So we're fortunate that we have these other great events to point them to as well.
And anybody who's listening to this with kids, I would imagine any of the events that they participate in, they also get a T-shirt, which is part of the entry fee.
Yes, a T-shirt and a medal, of course.
And you can never have too many T-shirts.
Nope, not an event T-shirt.
We're talking with Leslie Turis. She is the youth program manager at P3R. Kids of Steel is a really cool program to get kids involved with running. Any other plans that you are willing to share with us as far as expanding out Kids of Steel, or just keep abreast of your website and look for upcoming activities and things that are promoting activity among kids?
Yeah, definitely stay tuned. We want to support anyone under the age of 18 as they attempt to join the running community. One thing we have going on now is middle school run club grants. So any school that would like to start a middle school run club to be prepared for our 5K, which is the same day as the Kids Marathon, we have funding available to help them out.
And we'll make sure we have extensive show notes to show that. Leslie, I want to thank you for coming out in the middle of the polar vortex, for crossing a bridge and meeting with us at Southpointe to talk about Kids of Steel and how running has made a significant impact in your life in a positive way. FitLab Pittsburgh, we really believe that movement is a lifestyle and not just an activity.
Great. Thanks so much.
Thanks for listening to the latest episode of FitLab PGH, brought to you by Moving to Live. Intro and exit music is Marathon Man by Jason Shaw. Check out the show notes for contact info for our latest guests, links to other information mentioned in the episode, and links to our sister podcast, Moving to Live. Moving to Live is a podcast about movement and exercise for professionals and amateur aficionados. Moving to Live offers topics from career development to coaching tips and education resources to advice for parents of student athletes. You can subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or Google Play, or check out our website for other subscription options. Your free subscription gets you notified when we release a new episode. Questions, comments, suggestions? Email us at fitlabpgh@gmail.com or follow us on Twitter and Instagram at fitlabpgh and like us on Facebook. If you enjoy our podcasts, please tell your friends about us and consider leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts. Make FitLab PGH a go-to place to learn more about movement in the Pittsburgh area. Until next time, keep on moving.